John Howard is a man of action, not just a man of words. Whether it was 9/11 or other threats of terrorism, he stood by his friends, his allies in the United States and around the world, and even before the Bali massacre, was warning the world about the threats that we're currently living under. I note with deep respect that we have 3 consuls general, new consul general from France, a good friend from the Czech Republic, and also the consul general from Germany. This morning, the intelligence and law enforcement officials in Germany, thank God, acted quickly in Berlin, and looks like they forestalled the possibility of a terrorist attack. So we already know that, and we're reminded by the enemies of freedom every day, that if we don't stand together, we're going to sink, and sink very, very quickly. It is quite telling that on this 70th anniversary of the Munich Accord, so-called Munich Accord, that first sealed the fate of a democratic country known as Czechoslovakia and its people, and set the stage for the horrors of World War II. There are times when you have anniversaries of history where you have to go into a whole long explanation of why it's important to remember. And we have certainly a very powerful lineup of people to do so this morning and at the program also on Sunday. But I think that the average citizens around the world get it, that the price of appeasement in the world we live in today is going to be unbelievably, but for sure, much higher than the price that was paid for appeasement in World War II. On behalf of the Simon Wiesenthal Center,
thank you.
These are the 9 documentaries that the Wiesenthal Center produces. My boss, Rabbi Herr, right now is in Jerusalem, has 2 Academy Awards in his office, not 1. So he's not only a good rabbi and a brilliant leader of this, the Wiesenthal Center, but a wonderful filmmaker. And we hope that you'll have an opportunity to view these documentaries, including a wonderful biography of Simon Wiesenthal himself. And again, on behalf of the entire Jewish community here in Los Angeles and the 400,000 members of the Wiesenthal Center, I just want to say thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to meet you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Munich has become the greatest historical symbol of the failure of a policy of appeasement. We all understand that, and endeavouring to understand the significance of this commemoration and to recall that the Munich Agreement represented the high watermark of the 1930s policy of appeasement. It's very important to understand the mood of the time, because the mood of the time when Munich was consummated is in fact the message for our time. It's already been indicated that appeasement was a popular policy. Sadly, it was. And in 1938, when Chamberlain came back from Munich and he infamously waved that piece of paper in the air, he quoted Shakespeare. He quoted Hotspur from Henry IV, Part 1, when he said, "Out of this nettle danger, we pluck this flower safety." And the mood at the time was one of jubilation. And it was understandable. Why? Because millions of people had died in the trenches of World War I on both sides. I mean, France lost 1.5 million men, Germany more. My own country, with a male population of only 2.5 million, had lost 60,000. And the losses on the British side and of Britain were enormous. So you could understand why people had this attitude. And that made all the more remarkable the prescience of people like Winston Churchill, who warned and understood from the very moment that Hitler gained power in 1933 what a threat he represented. And the resonance today of all of that is that it is inevitable that populations over a period of time will tire of arguments that say you have to deal with difficult situations by saying no. We're seeing it today in America, in Australia, in Britain, in many parts of the world, people are starting to say, well, maybe this war against terrorism has been exaggerated. Maybe it's not a problem after all. Maybe the threat has passed. It's now been pleasingly, happily, it's now been more than just on 7 years since the terrorist attack in New York and Washington, and people understandably will think that the threat has passed. I hope it has, we all do, but we'd be unwise to imagine that terrorism is something, given its roots in Islamic fascism, it would be unwise of us to imagine that it's not something that will be with us for a very long period of time. And trying to encourage populations to maintain resistance to terrorism and to put up with the inconvenience of laws, and to hear, understandably, the civil libertarians saying the laws go too far, it's a very, very difficult thing. And the real message of Munich for today's generation, the real lesson of Munich from today's generation is, of course, as the German consul said, a policy of never giving in is the right policy. But the other great message for today's generation is that you have to persevere in dealing with manifestations of evil. They don't go away of their own accord. All of my understanding of the modern terrorist threat is that the terrorists will play a long game. They will wait for years. And terrorist attacks are years in the planning. And we have to maintain a vigilance. We have to cooperate. We have to persevere, as President Bush courageously did in Iraq. It's interesting that the wife of the Iraqi president is here today. We ought to remind ourselves that the beginning of last year, when President Bush announced the surge, he had virtually no support. He had a lot of criticism within military areas. There was very little worldwide diplomatic support, and he faced a lot of political criticism here in the United States. And yet here we are in September of 2008, and the outlook in Iraq is arguably better and brighter than the outlook in Afghanistan. I think indeed it almost certainly is. And whilst I don't want to foolishly say that the problem is behind us, there is now a greater prospect that the goal of a democratic Iraq sitting, I hope, coexisting peacefully and positively with the one true democracy in the Middle East, that's the State of Israel, that goal can be achieved. So it is a reminder that the message of Munich is a twofold message. You never surrender when your cause is right. That's the first and most obvious message, and a policy of appeasement does not ultimately buy peace when you're dealing with evil. But the other message is that in today's different circumstances, but nonetheless the choices in a way are analogous, that we must understand the need for perseverance. We can't tire of the fight against terrorism, because that is exactly what our enemies want to do. They have infinite patience. They have infinite patience as well as infinite hostility. And if you tire in the face of that, then they are halfway along the road to achieving their goal. But Avi, thank you very much for having me here, and it's very nice to meet you.